The number of adults being prescribed medication for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD in New Zealand, has risen tenfold in 16 years. Yet many more people are still likely to be missing out on getting help. Many were seeking explanations for why they've struggled over a long period of time. Some have children who had already been diagnosed. Now, the findings were published today in the New Zealand Medical Journal and confirm that between 2006 and 2022, the number of adults being prescribed ADHD medication rose tenfold, from 55 prescriptions per 100,000 people to 556 prescriptions per 100,000. This compared to a threefold increase in prescriptions for children. The adult group was made up of both people whose ADHD had persisted since childhood and people who had been diagnosed for the first time as adults. And the findings stated the increase did not necessarily reflect growing rates of ADHD in the country, but possibly social acceptance and awareness of the condition. Around 0.6% of adults are now getting ADHD medication, but this is below the estimated 2.6% of adults who have the condition in the country. And this indicated a significant treatment gap for those that do have the condition. ADHD New Zealand chairman is Darrin Bull, and he joins us on the platform. Darrin, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for your time. I'm not sure, were you aware of the findings published today in the New Zealand Medical Journal of? Yes. Does that number surprise you?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. From ADHD New Zealand's perspective, our surveying is showing increased number of people seeking a diagnosis and increased barriers to getting a diagnosis, so the treatment gap is continuing to grow. Also, we're aware, when comparing New Zealand to Australia and the UK, the approach we take is about half that of what they see in those countries.
Can I just ask you, because there might be people listening too that aren't fully aware of what, I've looked up, obviously, because I knew I was talking to you, that ADHD is a neurodevelopment condition. It's not a behavioural disorder.
Correct.
Yeah, so explain so does everyone experience the same symptoms?
No, if only it was that easy. There's effectively three types of ADHD. The first type is the most common type, where it is someone who has emotional, behavioural control, they can't concentrate, and, that's 90% males. The second type is also issues with attention and concentration is an issue, but they're much quieter, and they're the quiet girls in the classroom to stereotype, because that's 90% female. And then the third type is combination of both. Now, in the survey period, if you think back all the way back to 2006, it shows you how amazing the science has changed. But 2006, ADHD was thought of as the domain of boys in school. So girls and women could not get it, which is not true. And adults are unlikely to have it, and that's also not true. So it's a big improvement in the science. And I became involved with ADHD New Zealand in 2008 because my son has ADHD and he was 4. And North and South magazine had this article which was headed, so I'll never forget it, ADHD or bad parenting. And I was so incensed by that. It's not bad parenting.
Yes, well, it's interesting because I did look at that, and you were right. It was considered a boy disease, and where the girls' symptoms were more subtle, and people did say, oh no, that kid's just, obviously the parents aren't controlling the child. So
that's right. That's right.
So okay, the question then is, because kids are rambunctious, right? So children do go through that stage where they're all over the place and everywhere and up and down and yelling. So how do we know that, do people jump straight to ADHD nowadays, or how do you tell?
So first of all, diagnosis for children is through a pediatrician, a clinical psychiatrist, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist. So it is important to get to the right person to get a diagnosis. and they have processes which can look at that. Not only is it, this is a child being a child, the cure for a 4-year-old is a 5-year-old, is a quote I've heard. But it's also, some of the symptoms of ADHD could be other issues, such as fetal alcohol or autism. So it's really important to get diagnosed by a medical specialist. The second aspect, if you look at the teenage years, where a lot of people are getting diagnosis from is TikTok, and that's something we wouldn't encourage.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
You talked about also getting, we talked about medication or getting assessed. What are the barriers to getting assessed or getting medication? Is it actually getting in to see somebody that's qualified? Or is it a cost issue? Is it a mixture of both?
Yeah. There's 3 or 4 barriers. We advocate that primary health care is very important. So the first barrier is GPs. Research that we've done with our community suggests that only 26% of GPs understand ADHD. And so we really advocate increased training there, which the Royal College of GPs is working on, which is really pleasing. So a GP would then refer to a specialist. Look, it's terrible in the public sector. You can have wait times in Auckland, which has the most of 6 months, and outside of Auckland, outside a main centre, unless you're in real crisis, that could drift over a year. Half of people who've completed our survey go private. I mean, even the wait times of private 3 to 6 months. And then if you do see a specialist, they might prescribe some medication, and not all people with ADHD need medication. That's a really important thing. And then it's a special authority process, which has a number of barriers, but one of the barriers is every 2 years you need to go see your specialist and get confirmation of ADHD and that the medication is appropriate. That's a problem when you can't get to a specialist in New Zealand.